Hello, my name is Maya. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm on my floor because this is a view of my bookshelf. We're gonna do a book review. Yes, I do actually read the books on here. I don't just watch Supernatural. Though my channel would say otherwise, so I would get it. Anyways, today I'm going to review Brave New World. Yes, I did buy it for $6, and no, I did not take off the sticker. And I'm kind of afraid to, because I feel like it's kind of part of the book now. You can see I've attempted, but I feel like it's just going to end up being worse. So now you know I bought it for $6. I bought it at Indigo for $6. I bought like 2 others, I think. It was like a deal. Anyways, that's not why you care. I bought this years ago, and I finally got around to reading it. And it fucked with me so hard that I decided I just need to sit and talk about it. So Brave New World is written by Alduous Huxley, however the fuck you pronounce this man's name. According to this Wikipedia page I have over here, it was published in 1932. So it's a classic, I guess, written in between the First World War and Second World War. It's a dystopian novel, and it describes a very interesting future. Yeah, so I thought I would just go over briefly like what this book is, the entire plot. This is going to be a spoiler review, so if you haven't read this book and you don't want any spoilers, I wouldn't recommend watching this. But if you have read this and you just want to hear someone else's thoughts, awesome. If you are a student who needs to write a report about this and it's due like in 2 days, I got your back. We can do this together. Me and Spark Notes will be your essay. Or if you're just interested in it and you don't care about spoilers. But yeah, it's gonna be spoilers, so just warned, I'm not gonna like not say anything. I just want to talk about it. So Brave New World follows this society in the future. They're written kind of like AF 400, like it's kind of similar to like Before Christ, but AF is like after Ford. So I don't know the exact time that this takes place, but it's AF something like 100 or 1000. And that's how they kind of keep track of dates. But basically what ended up happening is there was this sleep kind of conditioning that came into effect by psychologists, and the sleep conditioning ended up really taking off, not when it first got published, but like later. And it was basically kind of thought of as a way to control society. What this society has come to, and this book takes place in London, and mostly in London. They do travel to like North America, but we'll get to that later. Reproduction is mass produced, so they have eggs and sperm, and the eggs and sperm go through basically a factory-like embryonic cycle in order to like become babies. So reproduction is no longer within the female, it is within the factory, and they mass produce like twin sets. So there are people in this world that look exactly the same. There's like a mass production of twins because they just take a bunch of eggs and a bunch of sperm and they just go, and they all can look the same. And basically what they do is they mass produce people in order to have certain class certifications. So basically the highest class you can be is like an alpha double plus, and then it goes down from there. Yes, it is the Omegaverse for all those fanfic readers out there, but also not. But yeah, they use like the alpha double plus is the highest you can be, then it's like alpha plus, alpha, alpha minus, beta plus, beta, beta minus, so on and so forth, until we get down to epsilon, which is the lowest class you can be. And basically you're conditioned to be in your class. So they use sleep conditioning, where they use repetitions in your sleep as a child when you're in the factory setting, and they condition you to be okay with your class station, and they condition you to have certain preconceptions about society. So in this society, they kind of want you to have a certain job. They make you an epsilon, you're doing the lowest of the low, but you're going to be happy about it because everyone belongs to everyone is their like phrase. And alpha is same thing. It's all conditioned the same, but you're given different even statures and heights and like hair color and body build, and you're given different preconceptions of like who you can get. So alphas are conditioned to be super sexy, And then they're conditioned to believe that they can get any woman they want, and they can basically only get like betas, because like beta women are alpha women, but there's no alpha woman, I think. All alphas are male, because this is a sexist society. So beta women is like the highest they can get. And they're kind of also conditioned to believe that like people who don't look perfectly aesthetically pleasing, because in this society people don't age properly, so people remain looking young, youthful, and beautiful. And if they don't fit that standard, they're conditioned to believe that they're ugly. So aging is something that these people have never seen, and they're conditioned to believe that this is disgusting. Motherhood is something that these people have never seen, and they're conditioned to think that that is like hilarious. And same with fatherhood. No one gets pregnant. Everyone takes contraception like it's conditioned in them, which it is. No one has any long-term relationships. The entire society is built on the fact that everyone belongs to everyone. So you don't get married, you don't have long-term relationships, you don't commit to one person, and it's basically all based around sex. There's no love, there's no liking. It's all about sex. So this society is very much based on like sexual pleasure and having only things that are pleasurable and only happiness. Everyone in the society needs to be happy. And happiness, if you're not happy, then you take the drugs, which I'll get to that now. So basically they have Soma, which is like their drug. And Soma is not necessarily explained what drug it is, but my interpretation is that it's a hallucinogen or something along the lines of like weed, but definitely more powerful than weed. But basically you're taking Soma, and these people are addicted to Soma. So they have Soma all the time, and Soma is considered like a break. So they don't really sleep, but they do take Soma, which is like their sleep thing. And they go on like long Soma vacations where they just kind of hallucinate the entire time. And this entire society is basically controlled by their conditioning and their Soma rations, which are given out like after they're done work. And then also just they have like sports basically. So you're supposed to want to play sports, but they're like really weird sports. Like there's a game of golf, but it's not normal. I can't remember what it's called. And like stuff like that. And then you're supposed to like go to these like erotic movies. So you sit and watch porn with everyone else in the film, and it's like sensory porn. So you can feel everything. They call them the feelies. And you're supposed to do that for like entertainment. They have like these singing circles, like music's very present in this book. And then the way that they control society, singing is, and music is used to be more sexual, to control. Like later on in the book there's a riot and they use music to calm everyone down. So they've really got these people conditioned on certain things when they're sleeping, when they're kids, they grow up, they become desensitized to like death and stuff like that. So there's no more grieving. Everyone's okay with death. People go and die and they're like think it's great, and their body gets given as like energy for the rest of the society, and they think that's a great honor. I don't really see much wrong with some things, but like all in all, it's a very different society from our society, and everyone is really controlled to a T. And if you're not fitting into the mold that you were conditioned to be fitting in, then people believe that there's something wrong with you and will like shun you. Which brings us to one of our main characters, Bernard. I think he's an Alpha Plus. But he's an Alpha Plus, and basically he does not look like an Alpha Plus should look. So Alpha Plus is supposed to be big, muscular, manly man. But Bernard is like a skinny, kind of short dude, and he's not very physically attractive, whereas Alpha Pluses are supposed to be physically attractive. And he looks more like an Epsilon, which is the lowest caste you can possibly be. So he gets kind of shunned from the other Alpha Pluses, and even like the women that he's supposed to have falling on over him, because men can get any women they want in the society if they're like an Alpha Plus, and they're expected to have as many women as they want. And these beta women are not supposed to be denying them their sex, but Bernard gets denied it because he doesn't look like an Alpha Plus. There's rumors going around that there was like alcohol injected in his test tube when he was an embryo, things like that. Basically, he doesn't fit in. he's a very lonely guy. Because he's so lonely and removed from society, he doesn't have this happiness that's ingrained and expected in society. So he's very depressed when everyone is supposed to be happy in the society. The entire thing is that happiness is key, and they do everything in their possible way to be happy and distracted from anything that could make them unhappy. So Bernard, because of the way that he was kind of brought up in the society, does not view the society the same way that the others do, and it's because he's been shunned, and that's not something that happens very commonly in the society. We start off with Bernard, and then we meet Lenina, who is a beta, and she gets asked by Bernard to go to the reserve, and we don't find out about what the reserve is until a little bit later, but basically like her friend Fanny is like, why would you go with Bernard, like, you know, he's ugly, like stuff like that. But basically the thing that we learn about Lenina right off the bat is that she's been seeing this one guy, Henry, for about 6 months, and I think it's been only him. And so, as I had mentioned before, in the society, you're not supposed to have only one romantic partner, or not even romantic, sexual partner. And so Lenina is kind of a little bit different in that regard, where she hasn't taken too many men, and Fanny keeps telling her that like she needs to go get her pregnancy hormone or whatever it was, and that something's wrong because she doesn't want to have multiple men. And then Lenina, I think kind of out of rebellion, decides that she's going to take Bernard as another sexual partner because Fanny was kind of like being rude to her about her sexual ways. That's kind of the setup for the book. So Bernard, he is kind of on thin ice with his bosses, the Alpha Double Pluses, he works in like the reproduction factory, and he does conditioning there. And so throughout the book, he'll actually repeat conditioning. Like he'll say, like someone will say something, like Lenina will say something that's conditioned in them, and he'll say, okay, repetition 13 times in your sleep for 6 to 8 years or something like that. You know, like he'll do that throughout the book. But he works in the conditioning, and he's basically been ruffling feathers because he's not fitting in, as I had said before. So his boss basically says that he'll be sent to Iceland if he doesn't get his shit together. And Bernard also has this friend Helmholtz, who is also another Alpha Plus, and Helmholtz looks like an Alpha Plus and acts like an Alpha Plus, but lately has had this like existential awakening where he's like no longer happy and he doesn't like the way that his life is going. And Bernard is kind of envious of this because Helmholtz can get any girl he wants. He has the respect of the commanders, like the highest in charge, but he's upset and he's depressed and he's complaining about his life. But because they're the only two in the society that they know of that are having problems, they kind of form together in this really like not healthy friendship, but it's like a friendship of necessity. And so that'll kind of come back later. So just know that that's the setup. Anyways, so when Bernard is going to get approval to go to the reserve with Lenina, his boss tells him this story, kind of unprompted and very weirdly. It's almost like he kind of forgot that Bernard was there for a second, but he tells him this story of how he went to the reserve about 20 odd years ago, and he brought this girl named Linda, and Linda went missing in the reserve, and so he left without her. And this is really important, crucial information that we will come back to later. So Bernard and Lenina go to the reserve, and the reserve is basically indigenous people in North America who are not part of civilization, and civilization is what I had just described at the beginning. And so they go there, a little bit racist. It was written in the 1930s though, so it was kind of expected. But the indigenous people are called Indians. They do kind of, the author has them kind of living in like rundown huts, and I think they're supposed to kind of be a metaphor for our society. However, all of them are indigenous, like in what we would consider indigenous. And they have like these rituals in society, rituals that are indigenous rituals, but they're also like Christian rituals. So you can see that Christianity is no longer a thing in the civilization of the rest of the world, but it got amalgamated with indigenous rituals. That's kind of interesting. They arrive at the reserve and they meet a white kid, and Bernard immediately remembers the story that his boss told him about Linda disappearing on the reserve. So they talk to this white kid. His name is John, and he's like the only white guy in this reserve. And we learned that John's mom is actually Linda, who went missing, and she has been having a shit time because, as I mentioned previously, these people are conditioned to hate motherhood and not want to be mothers. But Linda actually got pregnant with John via the Bernard's boss, and had a kid, and it really fucked with her. Linda is a really interesting character, but I'll get more into that later. But basically, Bernard sees this as an opportunity to get out of the Iceland threat, because he thinks that if he brings John back, the people of his society will want to kind of study John. But also, if he brings Linda back, then Linda can say that his boss is as a father, which is something super unheard of and wrong with the society. So his boss will have to like kind of take into this bribe. It's a very malicious intent that Bernard brings John back. There's nothing that like he wants to introduce John to the society. He wants to take him out of this place where the indigenous people have been very rude to him, and he's had this loneliness. He doesn't really see a kindred spirit, even though they are kind of kindred spirits, where Bernard has been shunned by his society and John has been shunned by his society because they don't fit in. And there's nothing that he really just doesn't want to get sent to Iceland. I don't know what's in Iceland, but it's a threat that gets thrown out in this book. So he brings John and Linda back. Linda has aged. She's around 45. She's gained weight. And immediately everyone in her old society shuns her because she looks disgusting and she doesn't look young and beautiful anymore like they're used to in the society, and she's aged. Ew. But what else is going on is Lenina finds John attractive, and John has fallen head over heels for Lenina, even though they've had maybe 2 words of conversation. But Lenina is gorgeous, and she's probably the first female he has seen of his own kind ever. And his own kind, okay, he's never seen anyone like her before. He's immediately drawn to her, and so he like falls in love with her, and it's a whole thing. But Lenina is also attracted to John, but not in the same way that like John is attracted to Lena and Lenina. So they go back to the society. Bernard becomes extremely popular because now he has the savage, which is what the society refers to John as. And John is white. I just want to put that out there. He is actually like technically born from their society, but they don't believe in births, and he's super weird. He's been raised by the indigenous. He has not been raised in the society. So he doesn't take soma, stuff like that. Like, he's not normal. So they call him the savage. And basically Bernard takes complete advantage of this. He's a ladies' man now, guys. He is getting that sex. And also he's been using John as like a bribery to get people to come and see him and spend time with him, which is something he didn't have before. And John meets Helmholtz, and they actually have this really interesting dynamic where Helmholtz is trying to like be really deep and kind of feel, because like John's really into Shakespeare. He got given the Shakespeare book, and John like recites a lot of Shakespeare throughout this. And him and Helmholtz sit and read a lot of Shakespeare, and Helmholtz is like really into it. Like, he likes the depth, the way that Shakespeare looks at the world and how it's different from this happiness bubble that they live in. But there's this one part where like Shakespeare's talking about like motherhood and fatherhood, and I remember Helmholtz just starts laughing, because even though Helmholtz may be kind of questioning his society, he is still madly conditioned. And it's the same with Bernard. Bernard throughout the book does question his society, but he still wants the things that he's been conditioned to want. Like, as soon as he gets all the women, he's immediately turned into an alpha plus. Like, there's a point in the book where once he kind of gets what he wants, like, he becomes that. But then he's hosting this dinner party after a little while, and John refuses to come out and like entertain the crowd. And so then Bernard kind of loses his status immediately. Like, people just drop him. So it's a very short-lived thing, but it does show that, like, genuinely, though Helmholtz, Bernard, and Lenina might show kind of signs of being a little bit different from their conditioning, they are still rooted in their conditioning, no matter the slight changes. And so that brings me to Lenina. Basically, John, after he kind of refuses to come out of the dinner party, has also kind of been avoiding Lenina's advances. Lenina's like, come on, let's have sex, because that's like what she's like, yeah, I find you attractive, you find me attractive, let's do it. But John's not thinking that way. He's Christian. He's like been raised for the marriage and love and long term, but Lenina's not that. She just wants sex. And so Lenina decides to like confront him about her feelings for him, and so they go up, and this is kind of the beginning of John's downward spiral. And basically Lenina comes in and she's like, I really like you, John, like I want to do this. And John's like, great, like I'm in love with you. And so Lenina's like, amazing, why don't you say something? I'm just gonna take off all my clothes right now and throw myself at you. And John becomes extremely uncomfortable because like he's been conditioned in his society in a way to believe that Lenina's being a whore. And we saw this when he was growing up. There's a lot of flashbacks of his mom doing what she had been conditioned to do, which was just to sleep around. But John saw this as a bad thing, and people would call his mom a whore and would like really shun him because his mom was doing these sexual activities that she'd been conditioned to do. So he attacks Lenina, and so she like locks herself in the bathroom. And then meanwhile, Linda has been on a soma journey. Like, she's just been high on soma, and soma will kill you if you take a large amount. It is a drug. So Linda's basically on death's doors, and after this attack that he poses to Lenina, he gets a call that his mom is dying, or like has been sent to the death ward. And so he arrives at the death ward, and we get one of the best scenes of the book. And basically he arrives and he's in distress because his mom is dying. And we as the reader are like sympathetic to this. Like, Linda was a shit mom, and I'll get into that later because I want to go over kind of more specifics later. But Linda was a shit mom, but that's still his mom, and he doesn't want her to die, and he's upset. And so he arrives there, and the nurse like doesn't understand, because she's been conditioned to believe death is no big deal, that no one is important enough to grieve. She doesn't understand why he's so upset. He comes in and he feels like it's appalling to him, but it's also appalling to the nurse, which is so interesting. He doesn't feel like they should be acting like so nonchalant, but they don't understand why he's not acting so nonchalant. And he goes to her bed, and he's like crying beside her, and the nurse is like, I don't know what to do. I've never had a grieving person. People don't grieve here. And then these little sets of twins come in, and they're getting their death desensitization at around like the age of 8. And they come in and they're looking at all the beds, and they're kind of like making fun of them, pointing, and they go to Linda and they're like, ew, she's so disgusting. And of course, like, John's there grieving his mom, and he's very upset, and he like yells at them to go away. And then while these twins are kind of walking around, Linda ends up dying, and he's distraught, but everyone doesn't understand why. It's one of the most powerful scenes in the book. And that's the pushing point for John. Like, he goes crazy. Like, he hates the society. And he runs out after like a period of grieving, and he sees the Epsilons being given their like daily after work soma tablets, and they're all lined up and they're ready to go. And he goes and he throws all the soma tablets, and he starts a riot. And then, as I was saying before, the riot people come and they end up stopping it. But Bernard and Helmholtz also arrive, because they had been trying to find John, because John was staying with Bernard and they didn't know where he was, and Helmholtz got a tip. So they arrive, and they all end up being arrested and brought to Mustafa Mond, who is the head commander of the London area for the society they live in. And so they get brought, and we get this really interesting conversation where Mustafa Mond said that he was at a point in his life where he also questioned society, and he also was kind of considering leaving and all that stuff. But basically he tells them that, alphas are made to do that because they're given more leeway than like an epsilon would. They basically deprive epsilons of like oxygen as a kid so that they don't have the brain capacity, but alphas do. And so it's a common problem. And he has this conversation with John that I'll talk about later, but basically it was a really great conversation. And we also learn that there's this island that people who don't fit in society, there's a bunch of islands, they go there. So Bernard and Helmholtz end the book going to these islands. I think they go together. But anyways, they end up going to these islands, and Mustafa Aman's like, you'll love the island. And Mustafa said that he had been given a chance to go to the island, but decided to stay to become a commander because he decided to give in to the happiness motto, even though he didn't feel it. But Bernard and Helmholtz couldn't do it. So they get sent to an island. John, on the other hand, gets told that he can't go back to the reserve because they're still experimenting on him. So he ends up kind of running away to Surrey in the London area, or I think that's just outside of London. And he runs away to Surrey to a lighthouse there, and he kind of tries to atone for his sins. He tries to remember Linda as she was because he feels guilty that she died, and he tries to atone for the sins that he committed with Lenina. And just tries to escape the society because he hates it. He hates civilization. He hates the way that he's treated. He hates the way that these people are. He hates that everywhere he looks there's twins, and he just can't do it anymore. So he's at this lighthouse. He's doing a lot of the whipping and stuff like that to atone for his sins. And then some epsilons end up finding him during his whipping thing. God, I don't know what it's called, atonement whipping. So they end up finding him, and they end up telling some other people, and then slowly but surely, like, the news shows up, and there's a film created about him, and these people are basically just like stalking his life. He basically becomes a zoo animal at the end, and people of the society will literally come and watch him and like chant at him, whip, 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 you know? And it becomes really, really like disgusting at the end. And they all come. And then at one point, Lenina comes with Henry, who was her lover from the beginning of the book. And he sees her and he like starts attacking her, and he starts attacking everyone else, and he really just loses it, basically. And then everyone kind of flees, and the day after, everyone comes back because they're like, oh my God, like, he's entertainment, right? It's like he's a zoo animal or something, and they're coming back for more movie character. And so they come back, and they basically push John to suicide. They don't tell you explicitly he died, but you get described that all they could see when they opened the lighthouse was John's feet swishing back and forth, hanging from an arch. So he hung himself. And this book was wild. If that wasn't a weird enough synopsis to make you believe this book was wild. Alduous Huxley wrote a book that I am sure he was definitely dealing with some things. If this is how he viewed society, because this is a commentary on a lot of things in society. And I want to kind of go over the good and the bad of what this book talked about. But this is a commentary on that. And if this is truly what he was thinking about, oh boy, I am sorry. I'm deeply like, I was reading this and I was like, my boy, are we okay? Are we doing okay? Has anyone checked on Alduous in a while? He's dead. But I want to read some of his other books because I think he's a very interesting author. I love the way that he presented things. And though, honestly, this book was insane. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna sit here and say this book wasn't insane. This book was insane, but I love the way he presented things. Let's go over that a little bit. So, the first thing that I wanted to talk about was how this society was kind of laid out. I think there were some really interesting good things that had been said in the society that maybe would have been so scandalous in the 1930s, but nowadays not as much so. Like, for instance, I don't think it's a wrong thing to embrace sexuality and to make sex and multiple sex partners or whatever you really want to do, honestly. Not everyone wants to have casual sex all the time, or not everyone is polyamorous, or not everyone wants to have a normal long-term relationship with marriage. But I think it's important to kind of say that, like, it's what you want. Though this society, it wasn't what you want. They were conditioned to want only one thing, which is casual sex and like no deep relationships. But I don't think it's a bad thing to kind of just embrace the sexuality. I don't think it's a bad thing to kind of have that openness about it. I don't think that was wrong of this society. I think the way that the society went about it was super wrong, because I also think it's really wrong to say that a woman can't have a choice in a man that she wants, and that if a man wants you, if he's an alpha plus, he can have you. And I think that's super wrong. No, women should be able to have a choice. But like, saying everyone belongs to everyone and women don't have a choice is not right. But the base idea of kind of more embracing sexuality, making it more, accessible, and having like the contraception be so well done. Like, these people are conditioned as fuck to use contraception. I think that's great. I mean, obviously, again, if you don't want kids, then that's great. Like, use contraception. Like, this book had some things going for it, though I can understand how in the 1930s using contraception and having multiple sexual partners was probably super scandalous, and people were probably like terrified. Another thing that I really liked about it was how they talked about what they did with the dead bodies, like how they would use the dead bodies for like energy, and they repurpose them. I think that's great. I mean, like, obviously, again, like, a time of Christianity, not having your body buried, not being dealt with in a proper Christian way would be, like, horrifying. But for me, I'm like, oh, hey, like, yeah, I get it. Like, repurpose the bodies, like, use them for energy. Like, that's great. So those were the two things I liked about that society. I also kind of felt like the mantra of, like, everyone belongs to everyone was a great mantra. In theory. Yeah, so like there were some things that were wrong with the society. Like, every once in a while I would read it and I'd be like, oh, like, that's not like horrible. I mean, the way you went about it was bad, but it's not like horrible. But I really think that the point that I kind of got out of it, and what kind of like threw me for a loop, was like when these people chose happiness over real human experiences. It was almost like every single thing in this universe was manufactured only for happiness. And it was interesting to have that conversation between John and Mustafa, where Mustafa was like, well, would you rather suffer? We're trying to give people happiness. And John was like, yeah, I would rather suffer, because what is life without suffering? Like, I'm not saying that, like, you need to suffer to be a human being, but they took away all range of emotions, basically. Like, you only can feel happiness and pleasure. And I can understand that human need and human want to have that be a thing. Like, if you think about everything that they put in place, they focused on sex, which brings people pleasure. Well, most people. And they focused on music, which is something that brings a lot of people pleasure. Sports, like physical activity, is great for someone. They tried to make it so that you would never hate your job, which is another stress that people have in this world, where they don't like their job and they're financially struggling. They took away financial stresses like that. You don't care about your caste anymore. You don't care about your social class. You've been conditioned to think it's okay. You don't care about long hours. You've been conditioned to think it's okay. They gave you drugs, which is something that can bring people pleasure, like hallucinogens. They made it so that your entire life is just a distraction. Like, when Linda was dying, they had the TV going, they had sensual music playing, they had aromas. It was all very like distraction based, but happiness focused. And even when it came to death, they don't want you to form these close bonds, because if you don't form close bonds, you won't care when you lose that person. It was almost like society had given up on being so distressed. And this was written after World War, where people were really, really distressed. This was written in the Great Depression, where people were financially struggling, when people were having a really hard time And honestly, like, a lot of humans suffer, and you're probably gonna lose someone you love at least once, and probably more than that if you think about it. And so what this society really put into perspective is how much, like, it's basically, do you want to have these real deep connections and these real experiences, or do you just want to be happy? Because it looked like you can't have either. And it was really interesting because, like, I thought that was a really interesting question to kind of pose. And it kind of got me thinking, like, would I rather live in this blissful ignorance where I never question anything and I just have sex all the time and just, like, apparently like my job, and there's no problems, no worries. You never think about finances or, like, the stresses that come along with, like, losing a loved one or grieving. And then you realize, like, how that takes away basically who you are as a person, like, having, especially, like, losing people who you can never have, like, a close bond with, and having only, like, these surface level sexual like, relationships is fine, maybe, like, every once in a while, but how can you never want something more? And it's like, it's the risk you have to take to kind of get this different type of pleasure. It may not be this one stream happiness that never ends, but it would be something maybe more powerful than that one stream happiness. It would be actual happiness every once in a while instead of just all the time. But it's kind of a give and take, and you think maybe someone in, like, the worst part of their life, like down in the dumps, having lost everyone, would want to live in a society like this for a minute, because you wouldn't care, and it would just, and, like, that was shown in the John situation, where it was, like, really interesting to see how distraught John was, but no one else was, because no one else cared. Death was nothing to them. It was just something that would happen. You don't even fear your own death, which again is something that, like, a lot of people struggle with. I would say everyone, you struggle with your own death, you struggle with losing people you love, and that thing is completely taken away in the society. It's like, what you lose and what you gain, is it worth it? Is it worth it to never have anything close or powerful or strong, but to, you know, be happy? It was a really interesting, I don't know, it was super interesting. I liked that conversation because John was trying to tell him that, like, even though they said that, like, everyone's happy, Mustafa Mond admitted not to be happy, Bernard wasn't happy, Helmholtz wasn't happy, people on these islands in the middle of nowhere were not happy. And so even in a society where everyone's claimed to be happy, there's not happiness. So how can you ever truly get everyone to be happy? You just can't. So why not just let everyone kind of live their life and make their own decisions? And that's another thing, there was no free will in the society. But the commentary around how even in a society like ours, we do get conditioned to believe certain things are, you know, something we should be doing. You know, as a child, you might get told, oh, you gotta get married, you gotta have kids and all this stuff. And you get given babies as a kid when you're, like, toy babies as a kid when you're a girl, or you get a certain haircut, or your parents dress you up in certain things, and you're conditioned by society to believe that something's wrong because you see it on TV, you see it in the news, you see people's reactions, you see your parents' reactions. It's almost the same, because we see that with John. We see John, who has not been conditioned in the same way that people in this society have, where it's, like, literally in your sleep repetitions. But he's been conditioned in a different way. He's been conditioned the way that we are, where it's just looking and seeing other people, seeing what other people think is wrong. Do any of us really have that free will, if you think about it? Like, we're not controlled in the same way that this society is, for sure. But even people who have, like, more expressive free will of thought, a lot of people can get bullied out of that. And there's always problems with, like, expressing anti to the main idea thoughts. And I'm not saying that those thoughts aren't wrong or anything. I'm not saying that sometimes you should just keep your mouth shut. But it's interesting how, like, we can all conglomerate over one thing, and it's like, it's the same as with Bernard and John, where you don't fit that mold, you get pushed to the side. And I mean, this is a book that I don't really think was meant to make any racist standpoints. Like, I can kind of see a little bit of commentary there, but I'm not going to say that it was made to like look at how racism affects people and, you know, being shunned for not looking right I don't really think it was super into that, so I'm not going to give the book that credit. But, you know, it was an interesting commentary on that regard. And it's like, if you don't have the free will, then you're always like, are you happier? Like, would you never have your own independent thought? Would you never think badly or in a way that would mess with you? It's interesting to think about. I think there was a really interesting conversation about religion in this book that I think this was a pro-Christian book. I'm not gonna say it wasn't. I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure it was pro-Christian. But there was a really interesting conversation about God in this book that I just found really interesting. Like, I'm not religious, I'm an atheist, so I really like conversations like this. But basically, Mustafa and John are having this conversation where John's like, well, what about God? Don't these people deserve to know about God? Why are you hiding the Bible? Why are you hiding things like that? And Mustafa's like, well, these people don't know what God is. It would just scare them. They wouldn't understand. They're not conditioned to believe that. And John's like, well, what about, like, shouldn't they have God? And Mustafa's like, well, they don't need God. They have God in a different way. Almost in this society, Ford is their God. He's the person who kind of made this society. And like, that's AF after Ford. It's kind of like before Christ. So he is kind of like their God in a sense. Not in the sense that, you know, it's in the strictly religious sense, but in the sense that he is this greater power. They swear, instead of saying, oh God, they say, oh Ford, you know? They have these worship ceremonies where they like sing and chant to Ford, you know? It's very prayer-like. And so even though these people don't have God in a sense, they have Ford. And it's super interesting to think about, because Mustafa's like, isn't God just what humans want God to be? Isn't God just like creation of humanity and what they believe in that sense? And it's true. I mean, if you think about it, like, every god or gods or any sort of person that anyone has to pray to has been created by humanity. And so I really liked that conversation. I was very shocked that came from a probably Christian man in the 1930s, but it was a super interesting conversation. And I think like it's important to kind of see those conversations in books, because even though this definitely was like probably Christian propaganda, like, oh my God, you don't want to be like society where everyone has sex. Marriage is key. But like, you know, it still was interesting. And I do kind of agree. I think God is what you create it to be, and God is what you make it to be. And if you kind of take a step back and think the society does have a God, they created their own God. They don't have a God in like a Christian sense, but they have a God as in Ford, and he's like this overpowering being who like monitors you, and you don't want to upset Ford and stuff like that. He created this society in a different way that, say, God created humanity. So that was super interesting. I really liked that parallel there. I liked how they kind of went about having that conversation at the end. I mean, there were some things I didn't really like about this book. First of all, this book's kind of batshit crazy at times, and definitely like I was super uncomfortable reading it. I know that at points I was meant to be uncomfortable reading it, but also there were times where I think it was just like it was written in a time where maybe that wouldn't be so uncomfortable. Like the assault of Lenina, and Lenina kind of assaulting John was very glossed over. Like that was definitely like an assault on both ends. Lenina definitely tried to sexually assault him, and he physically assaulted her, and that was kind of glossed over, though like John did reprimand himself, but not in the way that like he was mad about the assault, in the way that he almost sinned by having sex with her. So like it wasn't dealt with in the best of ways. I also like think the love stories, if you can even call them, were really weird. Like there was this one scene where John broke into the hut that Lenina and Bernard were staying in, and Lenina was on like a Soma trip, and so she was completely passed out, and John like broke in and like sniffed her scarf and like put it on, and like went through her luggage, and then like she was sleeping on the bed and he like went up and he like fell to his knees beside the bed and like said that he loved. It was weird. It was weird. It made me really uncomfortable. And I was like, oh my god. What the fuck? And then like this supposed love between Lenina and John was like so underdeveloped, and it was like you knew a man had written this because he gave zero fucks. But the thing is that the love stories in this book are actually what drive the plot. Lenina and Bernard is what we start off with, like Bernard wanting this connection with Lenina because he's kind of searching for meaning, and Lenina's kind of the only girl who gives him any attention. And then we kind of switch to Lenina and John, and that's also like another driving force, like, but they're so underdeveloped. And I think Bernard and Lenina were meant to be, but I think that that he should have put more effort into John and Lenina, because I think that like having John kind of have this breakdown over his love for her when they like barely spoke was a little bit like, okay, you know, like you can be sexually attracted to her, do not get me wrong, but why do you like, this was not warranted with what we got. I really liked this book, certain parts of this book. I really liked it. I really liked the commentary. I really liked how you decided, like, I would recommend reading it if you hadn't. It's really interesting, and I'm also a little bit just like, whoa. This is it's just a weird book, you know? Like, I don't even know what to say. It's so weird, but it's also good. It's definitely never like a book I've read before, and I probably will never read another book like this again. But I've probably gone on for too long about this now. But also, does anyone know if Bernard from Westworld was based on Bernard from Brave New World? I think it was. I see the connections. I see the dots tied. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but like a lot of these guys in this book are named after famous people in their society. So like Bernard's Marx, so he's like communism, Henry Ford, stuff like that, which is interesting because I don't really think that this guy was saying anything about the people as their selves. I think he just wanted to use famous names. Like, I don't know what the commentary was half the time when he was talking about these people. So that's interesting. It was like a bold choice to have everyone named after like famous people. Like they even brought Freud's name into this, which is like, I can't escape Freud at this point. He's just a leech on my side. I can't do anything, and he just pops up. Fucking Freud. But yeah, it's interesting that he brought these random like famous people in, and he named basically everybody after like famous people, but had no real commentary to say. Like, what are you saying about Henry Ford exactly? He like, was Ford really that bad of a person? Like, I'm kind of confused. What are we trying to say? I don't know about that. That was weird. But I hope this helped the whoever stuck around for this really long one, and I hope this helped you, English student who needs to read this by tomorrow and hasn't read it. I hope that I gave you something to write your essay on. So I get you. I understand. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you've read Brave New World, let me know what you think. It was a weird book, but I was into it. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.